Okay, still seems like we've... Aha! Maybe I should try this. Alright, that's something. Getting the sound.
What does this mean? Am I about to break down? Who can I trust to repair this properly without being taken advantage of? Hi, this is Rona from Skeeter's Auto Service.
How about that? When was the last time this thing played? Let me check my power draw. At 36 watts. I think I want to do a quick alignment here. Let's see, the alignment is for 465 kilocycles. So 465 kilocycles. I'll show you a little bit how I do this. So the big HP I mainly use for FM for doing sweeps. The rest of what you have here is, I'm going to say thanks again to X-Ray Tony B. If you guys follow him, you just kind of know what you recognize what you're seeing here. This was a great suggestion, Tony. I really appreciate it. It was something economical and something you could do pretty quick. So I really liked it. Okay, so let's go to 465 kilocycles. And that is, I need to shade that so I can see what I'm looking at. 465 kilocycles. Right, so what I'm doing, for those of you who may not be familiar, okay, so this thing uses an intermediate frequency of 465 kilocycles, which I have it set here. I'm coming in right in here to where this is plugged in to the, coming out of the tuning condenser, going into the converter, the first tube. So I'm attached basically right here, coming in, injecting a signal which is the IF frequency. And what I'm doing is I'm adjusting these capacitors right through here. So I've got a connection issue. That may have been it. Alright, it's kind of rusty. Needs to be cleaned up. I don't know what's going on. So what I'm going to do is continue tuning these capacitors. just going for volume. Later on I'll use a meter or a scope to make it really tight, but for right now this is good. Whatever's causing that cold connection is now the biggest issue. And it could be when I go in and replace the components and restore the RF side, it'll probably take care of it. Wonder if we get some better performance now. What do you think? Whatever that loose connection is, it seems to have really knocked down a lot of its sensitivity. Everything's microphonic. Maybe like a chassis ground for something somewhere. It's just tapping on the frame is causing an interference. We're still getting audio out of it. Go back to this signal generator again. Let's see if we've lost it all. This is going right into the converter tube. Okay, we're still picking up something through there. So it may be to do with the antenna coil. Because this, in order for us to get this, basically from here on, everything's working. And I've got the attenuation of this thing set down really low. Okay, so I have that loosely put through the antenna, this coil through the antenna. Yeah, we should be hearing something, I think. So it tells me something's wrong in the oscillator's not running, or something's wrong in this. Now I hear it. Okay, so there may be a problem with this tube. It had a weakness in it. I opted not to buy a new one of these. Maybe I should have. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I've tuned the frequency generator to give us a signal of about 800 kilohertz. Looking at this, there's a number of tuning condensers, condensers in several places. There's two here, which are for the antenna. One of them will trim the antenna for shortwave, I believe. And then over here you've got the oscillator tuning condensers, and there's 1, 2, 3 of those. looking at this band selector switch, it looks like these two only come into play when you're in shortwave position. When you go to broadcast, they're not connected. So the only one that's in circuit is this one right here, and that's the one that's connected in this location, which I believe is this one right here. I'm just going to try to tune this and see if I get something come in at 800 kilohertz. I've got it turned up quite a bit, and I'm not going to move it very much. But it's pretty tight to turn, so I had to go to a metal screwdriver. Here we are. You know, it felt like somebody just simply tightened it down. There was no alignment instructions with this, so I'm going to have to, apart from what the IF frequency is, and I know that I correctly aligned that because I set the frequency generator at that, went right into the cap, and then tuned these. After I did that, I was no longer able to pick up any broadcast stations. So that is what sent me to say, well, maybe the oscillator wasn't working right. And so I adjusted that trimmer capacitor and got it to tune in to where I was able to pick up what this was giving me. So that should have tuned it in correctly. But I'm not picking up stuff now. So I don't know. I'll have to think about it some. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of handheld here. I'll try to make it quick. So what I'm doing here is that I'm looking at maybe why this tube started maybe to drop out. It seemed like it worked for a while and then it started to fade away before I got into doing the messing around with the IFs. But like I said a while ago, I'd like to see if maybe something was going on here, maybe fix this. The reason I'm concerned about it is that, for example, this 56, which is used to kind of drain some I guess electrons off of this first grid to the cathode, it's supposed to be 56K, and it was reading 76K. This 330 was reading over 400, and I don't know about this cap, but one of the things I was looking at was this cap and how it was routed to ground. Is, you remember when I was thumping on the cabinet before, and I was getting some microphonics, anything that touched the cabinet, so I got to thinking about, at that time, maybe I had a cold connection to ground that was causing some grief. So while I was at it, I was looking at this and found where this thing goes to ground. And where that thing goes to ground, so here's that resistor. Focus. Here's that resistor. So that's a 56K. But you come over here, and there is actually that resistor, sorry, the capacitor. And it's tied to a tag that's held on with a screw, a nut. And if you look at the amount of corrosion on there, that's not a very solid connection, is it? So I thought what I'd do is just measure the resistance between that wire and ground. And let's see what we get here. So I'm reading a little bit of resistance there, kind of comes and goes. I'm not even thumping it. So I think what I'll do is also put a dedicated ground line to some other place. There's a nice welded point, soldered point right in here. So maybe what I'll do is run a lead to connect it directly here so it gets a good chassis ground instead of going through this corroded screw terminal connection. And that'll just make sure that's good and grounded. So anyway, I'm going to change out a couple of these things here just while I'm in there before I start doing the looking further at the IF, just see if it makes any difference. Okay, so I changed out this 56K resistor here that's on the bottom of the converter tube, and also a couple of these capacitors that I mentioned. I wanted to replace this one because of what I was pointing to a while ago. It goes across the same area as what this goes across down here. But while I was in there, I went ahead and replaced this one back here, which is really part of the tone control, I guess, off of the position switch. It kicks it in for the broadcast. I didn't like the way it was tied onto this for ground, so I cleaned all this up, but I also added a ground wire that came from here down that tied in to a hard chassis ground down here. And the wire dressed along the side like this would be good. It runs along the chassis, so as far as the RF section, it looks just like the chassis because it's ground. Okay. I know you left me to replace the oscillator tube, the 6A7, but I don't have one. So I'd gone back and I looked at some of the earlier videos I had shot, back when I was getting radio reception. And one of the things I noticed looking at the video that I guess I didn't notice so much at the time is that the reception started to fade out. So that to me makes me think, okay, I've probably just got a bad converter tube. I didn't have a good reading on it. And I didn't have one at the time, so today I went and got a replacement converter tube. Replacements 6A7, to see if that will help what we're doing. But I thought I would do something else to show you here real quick. So I wanted to check to see if it looked like the oscillator was running, because I may have checked to make sure that the converter tube would pass through send the signal along through the IF string, so I can make sure that all the band passes were lining up at the IF frequency. But it didn't necessarily mean the mixer part was working right, so I want to make sure that my oscillator was sending a signal. And one of the ways you can do that is to, the radio's not making any sound like this one. It's not making that airplane sound. An airplane is making that sound. So one of the things you can do, if you didn't know this, you can take another AM radio, the transistor one is fine, and turn it on, and tune it in somewhere where you don't maybe have a weak station here. They're all weak out here where I live. There's a weak signal. I'll turn that up. And then with this on, turn this on and see if we get any interference. And I should get a noise when I pass where they are basically tuned to the same frequency. There we go. So you can hear that. I have to admit it's not very loud, but I'm getting interference with this oscillator running, interfering with this radio. And as I'm changing the frequency here, of course, between the tuning condenser and the oscillating coil is changing the frequencies that are there. So that should be the lower one, and then the other one was when it was probably spaced by the IF frequency there. Maybe it's just a harmonic of that. Alright, so it looks like this shows like the oscillator must be working okay. So the other thing I did was I've gone in and I've looked at a number of these components in here, and I've started looking at the antenna coil, measuring the resistances across it. I have a concern that the antenna is open. I don't see any damage on it apart from these whisker wires that are hanging off here. I did some research on these. Some of these have a doublet, and some of the different models that Grunow made. And I wonder if maybe this has something to do with tying into a doublet. I don't know. But I've been in there working on trying to get some voltage, current, try one more time, resistances across the different terminals. So I've made a little map and I've started trying to chart that out. I hope I don't have to get into this, because that means, okay, I had the output transformer was bad, the power transformer was hopefully good. The IF transformers, one of them's got a noisy capacitor in it, but since the bandpass goes through with the at the IF frequency, I'm assuming those are actually functional, although they may be intermittent. So if the oscillator is running, then maybe I have a problem here. But as I said earlier, you know, I did have that time when I had a radio program coming in when I first got the speaker fixed before I did my quick alignment. So I wonder if that's the converter tube gone out. So when I went back and looked at the video, I saw that it had faded out, and I really hadn't noticed at the time, but I see it now. So that might be either the grid leak isn't draining off like it should. So I replaced that resistor. That didn't really seem to fix it. So I'm going to put another converter tube in there just to do it, and then we know that the converter tube is not the issue. So let me do that. Let me power it down first. Flip it down. Definitely warm. .6A7. I can read it right there. Okay. Let's put our shield on it. There's my index pins. This isn't as easy as octals, where you can just plug in the big pin and rotate it till it drops in. I always struggle with this a little bit. Alright, that wasn't too bad. Grid cap goes on. Grid shield goes on. Cap shield. Hey guys, yeah, it's been a couple of days since I was working on this. I had to put it away and work on a few other things. And as I was thinking about it, I thought to myself, you know, since we got the audio side working, I really hadn't gone back in and re-looked at the plate voltages and things. And it might be really helpful to see what we see. I've got some concerns about a few odd objects. Let's get this thing brought back up and then bring it back, and we'll start to check a few voltages real quick. Went over and did some more cleaning on this selector switch, just in case it was causing some intermittent connections, because I've been having some of those. Also did a lot of checking of the wiring down in here, and there's a couple of those deteriorated rubber wires that you see from time to time. One of them goes from, I can't remember which, if it was well, it was basically both of them. The wires that came from the tuning condenser in, one of them comes into here, into the oscillator side, another one comes in here and ties into the converter tube. And the insulation was gone, and so I've just kind of positioned it where the wire is passing through the chassis and not touching it right now. This is the kind of thing that I'll fix, but right now I'm just trying to get to work. But I think it's not going to contact anything, so I'm just working with that for right now. And once I get everything working, what I'll do is then go in and fix stuff section by section by section, so that I don't do everything all at once and then it doesn't work anymore. I wonder what I did wrong. So anyway, so yep, got it back up to voltage. The other one I noticed is there's a wire here that's all cracked and so forth. It's a green wire that goes to the second IF. it's very noisy and it's got bad insulation, so I think I'm going to end up having to take this apart and clean it up some. You know, this is where there was one of the tuning condensers was really tight, and anyway, so this will probably eventually need to be worked on. Hopefully it's not preventing it from working right now, but we'll see. So let me do a couple of quick plate voltages. We're now up to line, and let's just see what we get here. Let's see, can you, make sure you can see that okay. So we both see this. Yeah, there we go. Alright, so we're in AC volts there, so we're going to switch this to deep, oops, don't want to do that yet, disconnect. Alright, DC volts. Let's see. And so I want to measure it against chassis ground, I believe. So we'll go here. Or better yet, let me go to one of these freshly done connections. That goes to ground. Okay, and then get something for week. Okay, work our way backwards. So we were always getting 0 volts at the plate of the audio output tube. That's 41. That's pin 2 of that. Let's just see what we're getting now for the plate. Well, that's a big difference. Okay, so that's 208 volts is what we're getting here now. So that's a big improvement. Now let's jump over here to the plate of 75. This is the second IF. So the plate of that should be, let's see, plate of that will be pin 2, and pin 2 is this one right here. It's up to 137 volts from 115. Okay, good. And then 66, pin 2. 66 is here, and pin 2 looks like this is, let's see, wait a minute now. It's this one right here. It was 278, now we're at 226. And then we'll come over here and look at the plate of the converter, 6A2, pin 2. Let's see, pin 2 the 6A7, so that's up here. And pin 2 is 1, 2, should be right here. 226 volts. Okay, so that's right here. So that looks pretty good. Now, the other thing I was looking at was checking the voltages down here on some of these guys down here. Now, one of the things I noticed is that this thing really had super high, it was reading high in terms of its resistance, this 1 watt, which is this guy right here. I'm going to check to see what its voltage is. Let me check the B+. So the B+ comes off of where those 2 capacitors are tied in their positive sides, so that'll be like right here, I believe. So the B+ is 225. All right, 225. Yep. So this end of this 1 watt capacitor is tied onto there. Okay, let's check on the other side of that capacitor, that resistor. That right here. I don't know. 5 volts. That seems a little low, huh? So that would be coming into the, let's see, that goes to both pin 3 of the converter and pin 3 of the IF, because they both come off the same tag. Let me put in a different, let me read that resistance again, and then I want to see about putting another resistor in here and see what we get difference on that output, because that seems a little low, huh? Check again. 5 volts positive DC. Yeah, let me rig up something and get something across that. Bring you back. Okay, so pin 3 is the screen grid up here for the, I guess you'd say the mixer section. So let's go down and check what kind of operating voltages you should expect at 3. And while we're at it, the plate is 2. That guy's halfway out. Be interesting to see now that we have these two guys out, if we get a difference in voltage up there on pin 3. We'll get this thing hooked back up and run the voltage up, see what we get.